Hello, and welcome back to my podcast. This is A Woman of Leisure. My name is Tembi. I am originally from New York City, and I am currently living in southern France. At 47 years old, I went back to university where I subsequently enrolled in the study abroad program and relocated to southern France to study business, art, and of course, French. I met my husband just 3 months after declaring myself forever single, and just a couple of weeks after I turned 50. So I just say that to say anything can happen because, women of a particular age were pretty much counted out and beyond our prime or considered. So today I wanted to come in and share three survival skills that I learned in New York City. Now, last week I did a video about why I left New York, and it sent me down this rabbit hole of imagery and memory of growing up in the Bronx during the 80s. And as you can imagine, it was just this cultural explosion of color and self-expression and the birth of hip hop music. And one of the things that stands out in my mind in terms of self-expression is graffiti. Now, graffiti was everywhere. It was very rare that you saw a train that was not absolutely coated in graffiti, if not layers of graffiti. And it was considered vandalism, and it is vandalism if you place your self-expression on somebody else's property. But I find it just awe-inspiring that graffiti is now a respected form of art that has earned a prominent space in many museums throughout the world. So, the first skill that I learned growing up in New York is resourcefulness. Being able to take something, not only create something out of nothing, but turn that nothing into something that gives you joy. Turn that nothing into something that makes you appreciate life and others appreciate life and affects others in a positive way. Thus, creating something that gives back to the culture and potentially changes the world. What more magic could you hope for? And I think about it, most artists throughout the world, they usually start from what's known as humble beginnings. So that's number one. Now, being resourceful, it's not about what's at your disposal. It's about what you do with what you do have. As they say, if you're grateful for what you have will increase. And it also increases your adaptability. Okay. So, number two is never take the first offer. Okay. Never take the first offer. Now, this is a very interesting one because that was probably my very first cultural experience or lesson in the change of culture when I moved here. When I when I returned to France, because I lived in France in Nice in 2015 for about a year, came back in 2021. And I have a friend who studied business management, finances, both here and in the States. He's a native native of France. He's a French native, a French national. That's the word I'm looking for. And he said to me, he said, negotiations are not a thing here. He said, you can ask for a better offer, but that's where it stops and ends. And when you look at the social economic structure of the country, this is a socialist country, okay? The States is a capitalist country. I'm coming from a capitalist background where if you don't ask for more or negotiate properly, it goes against it. It basically detracts from your value or people's respect for you or your professional, what's the word I'm looking for? You get what I'm saying. But here, you can ask, but after that, there's no more wiggle room because the salaries are limited and the country is structured in a way to ensure a livable wage and standard of living for everyone. hence universal health care exists here. And also the focus is very different here. It's not about buying a house, which, as you might imagine, with the limited wages can be very difficult. It's more about enjoying family, slow dinners, hence the term joie de vie. So, joy of life. So, my next one, actually, I can connect the two. The only time in New York I took my first offer. The only time I took my first offer was when I got a job teaching in the performing arts department at a prestigious private university in New York City. And the pay was so good, there was nothing to be said. As a matter of fact, that one paycheck paid my rent. Yeah. Now, that goes into my third one, creative strategy. Creativity is a strategy. And that's how I landed this job. So at the university, when I went into interview, I was sitting across the chair of the department, and her only question for me was this: how did you even know that we needed someone? We don't advertise. Private university, private funding, esteemed position, no advertisement. And I said to her, and I told her the truth. I said, well, a couple of weeks ago, I picked up your catalog because I was thinking of taking a class. And I was thumbing through the catalog. Yes, this is back when we still had printed catalogs. And I said to her, I came across the performing arts and I was shocked to see that you had a yoga program. There were two classes, but only one instructor listed. And the second class said TBD, to be determined. I said, that's odd. Why is there no one listed? So I picked up the phone right in that moment and I called the school. I called the number right there on the page. And I said, why don't you have an instructor listed? And the guy who answered the phone, the assistant in the office, the dean's assistant said, or no, the chairwoman's assistant said to me, well, and I told him, I said, New York City is exploding with teachers, yoga teachers. Why don't you have a teacher? He said, well, it's difficult to book the class because the class is offered, this particular class is offered on a weekend. And most yoga teachers reserve the weekends for their private instructor, for their private clients. I said, oh, well, I am an experienced yoga teacher and I don't take private clients. I prefer to work in a group. I find that working one on one is incredibly exhausting. I find it very exhausting. I find the group dynamic to be far more energizing, far more productive, in my opinion. So he says to me, would you be able to come in for an interview? I said, absolutely. So I shared this story with the chair, and she said, that is so industrious of you. And she told me what I needed to do. She said, here's this, you need to do that, da 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 da. Done. I started, what was it? I don't even remember. I think it was like the following term because we're already halfway into the current term. So I started a couple, like 6 weeks later, something like that. So yeah, you got to get creative. You just got to get creative. Opportunities can come when you least expect it. I met my husband on the other side of this wall because I was living in a mother daughter suite just on the other side of this wall, and I met him right here on the street. Not street, but we live in the private cul de sac. So I say that to say opportunities are everywhere, even if you have to create them yourself. So that is my three takeaways about survival skills from a New York City girl. Hope you enjoyed and tune in next time. Ciao. A tout à l'heure.